Welcome to this exciting exploration of the concepts of privacy and identity in the realms of virtual worlds. I'm Neo, an avatar, and your guide in this virtual universe. But who am I? Or what am I? Am I an AI-powered avatar, programmed to behave according to the preferences of the person I represent? Or perhaps those of someone else? Consider this. As you navigate in and interact with this virtual world, perhaps through a VR headset, a great amount of personal information is continuously collected and processed. This world can adapt uniquely to your tastes. But how? The master, the virtual world platform provider, knows everything about you. And when the human behind disconnects, the interactions with other avatars don't cease. On the contrary, they are all fueled by the data of the persons represented. Yet, there's more to unravel. If my actions aren't always guided by humans, do I possess legal personality? Am I accountable for my actions? Do I have rights of my own? Is this world compliant with the current privacy and personal data protection regulations? Intriguing, isn't it?
Organize several activities in several webinars for our purpose that basically is to promote the research on the legal and technical issues of the development of the metaverse. Those activities has covered things like digital avatars, virtual markets, content moderation in the metaverse, and certainly it has also included privacy and personal data protection in the metaverse. Because of that, it was for us. I was happy to attend the call from Gloria and from Simona to participate in this event. They have already summarized quite well what are the challenges that we have with the arrival of the metaverse in terms of privacy and personal data. As you have noticed by their introduction, the main topic of the event would be about personal data and privacy and probably the GDPR. For that purpose, we have invited Ricard Martínez, that is permanent professor of constitutional law at the University of Valencia, and the director of the Microsoft Chair on Privacy and Digital Transformation. And I dare to say that is one of the most prominent experts in the fields of personal data in Spain that I have known for almost, I would say, 25 years. I remember in the beginning that Ricard probably was the only one talking in Spain about data protection where the regulation does not even exist. We only had a directive on that term, and we didn't even have still an organic law in Spain. But in order to understand all those aspects that Ricard is going to talk about, which are specific on personal data, we considered that it was important as well to understand the technology that is behind the metaverse. Actually, one of the things that we have to ask is, what is the metaverse? Because if you have noticed later on what is happening, for instance, the European Commission, they adopt a communication and they just skip the term metaverse and they prefer to use the terms virtual worlds. And then you have other companies like Apple that instead of talking about the metaverse, they talk about spatial computing and things so sophisticated. In the end, we can be a little bit lost. Well, in order to find ourselves and not to be that lost, we have invited Mavi SÁNCHEZ-VIVES, that is from Alicante, but she works in Barcelona. She's a research and ICREA research professor at the Institute of Biomedical Research of the Hospital Clinic in Barcelona, where she leads the group on system neuroscience, and she's also co-director of the event lab at the University of Barcelona. And finally, we consider when we start working in the preparation of this event that it was important not only to talk about personal data and privacy, but also something that is behind those concepts. That is the concept of identity. and actually not of identity, but of digital identity. And digital identity in the end, in the metaverse, corresponds to avatars. Because of this topic, it was very easy to choose Martin Evers to participate because he has already run or carried out a study about this topic for the chair. And he also participated in one of our events, and he perfectly understands what are the legal challenges for the regulation or protection of the status of these avatars. Martin is professor of IT law in University of Tartu in Estonia, and he's president of RAILS, the Robotics AI Law Society. I have to say that one of the most intelligent things that I have done in my latest year of academic study has been to start following Martin in LinkedIn. I recommend that, I can tell you. And this is it. The way we are going to proceed is that I'm going to give the floor for 15 minutes to each one of them. And then I have prepared some introductory questions in order to give you the floor and to start the discussion and to allow you to ask any of those questions that you may already have in mind. So without anything else, Mavi, I give you the floor for 15 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to be telling you about the question that was posted at the beginning, what virtual worlds are and technologies that they involve. And even when it's only 15 minutes, I would like to tell you a bit about 4 points. The first one is immersive VR, applications, the metaverse, and data and interactions. So of course, it's going to be a bit short, each one of them. But I will start with immersive VR. And as you probably are familiar with, virtual worlds are digital worlds that they can surround us completely in the case of immersive virtual reality. This means it's very different from seeing a screen, but there is a head-mounted display that tracks your head and updates the display according to your head position. This means that you are going to be in a 3D world because you have a stereoscopic vision and you can look under objects and there is a 3D surrounding you 360. So there is a whole external world generated by a computer, and you can also have a digital body that now I will tell you more about it. So the different sensory inputs are going to be digital. Can be visual and auditory, more common. It can be also tactile, but eventually it can be olfactory and temperature and so on. So we have worked for many years on having a virtual body and how this can be generated. If the video can be run, please. Okay, so what you can see here is a system that has a few years, but you can see that one gets inputs to the brain that only are obtained with your own body, which is a first-person perspective of your own body, correlation with your real body. You can see yourself, for example, reflected in a mirror. So all this information creates a very strong illusion that that virtual body is your body. And this is going to have many effects. We've worked on this for many years and also others. So I'll tell you a couple of words about virtual environment, virtual embodiment, which it allows you perspective taking. This means you can do things amazing that you cannot do in the real world, like taking the perspective of another body, changing your body, changing your race, changing your age. And this is going to have a change in the attitude, and this is very well demonstrated. So it affects how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive the others, how we perceive the world. I'll give you a few examples because this is going to be at the root also of the applications. So for example, this has already 10 years, almost 11 years, how we demonstrated in our group that you can embody, for example, the body of a child. As you can see, you see the adults from a different perspective. And this is an article in PNAS, Proceedings of the National Academy of Science. And just to give you an idea of the cognitive effects, just being for about 15 minutes in the body of a child in terms of size and shape, it gives you a rescaling of the world around us. You see objects bigger. And this is a well-known now cognitive effect. So I just want to demonstrate you that this has effects in your own that can be used for the good. So for example, another very well understood effect also done in our group and many others is very consistent, is that if you embody a body of a different race and you move with it, you do in this case Tai Chi with a different body and so on, you create some kind of identification that decreases very consistently racial bias. I'm not moving forward. There is a very consistent decrease in racial bias, which is something that's being used with the obvious applications. So this is another interesting effect. And there are many others. There are effects in physiological responses. I will tell you later a bit about work on pain, for example, how by changing the virtual body, you can modulate pain. We are doing this with patients with chronic pain. It can act on cognition. It can act on emotions and behaviors. I won't go into the details, but this is the base of many, many applications, apart from the very obvious ones that you know, like entertainment, and eventually the metaverse for professional development and so on. So let me just browse across applications. And I work in a hospital, so I'm going to tell you some medical ones, which are well known, but of course they are applied in other areas. But VR for training, in the sense that one can learn, for example, training in surgery, and not only imagine the visual reconstruction, but also the tactile information, the force. For example, this is combined, as you can see here, in the lower right, you can see it combined with robotics, combined with force. So you can learn how the different tissues feel and so on. So it's very useful in training. It can be useful also to train patients to decrease the fear of procedures, to decrease the anxiety one can have an experience in the virtual world. Very important also for patients that can have isolation for 3 weeks. For example, if they are going to get some transplants and so on, they are isolated, it's very boring, and one can be in a virtual world playing golf or learning, attending a class, or visiting the family and being present there. For this, again, you would need some sort of robotic body, which can be a screen, but it can be, if there is a robotic body, you could be sitting at home with your family in a totally immersive environment if there is a proper camera on the other side. So VR for pain, it was used already at the end of the 90s. This was with kids that were burned, and then they created this snow world, and it was measured that the pain during the bandage change was clearly decreased, and also the brain activity was measured, and the brain activity reflected this decrease in the pain. So there was this brain recreation of this cold environment, and there is an interaction, and it's entertaining, and it's fun, and the pain decreases because pain also requires attention. We have worked, well, there are other strategies. For example, one can use to relax, to decrease anxiety, which is also associated to pain. Or we work on transforming the virtual body. We demonstrated with a series of papers, that scientific papers, that transforming the body can modulate pain, changing the color, changing the level of transparency. And this is from a study where we demonstrate how people with chronic pain in the arm for different causes, they can decrease this pain sensation by modifying this body. So I just want to illustrate medical applications. This was from a European project that it's already 14 years old, where we envisioned, it was called beaming, and it was the idea that one could beam somewhere else by using also virtual reality. So this was the vision, where someone could be at home, wear some head-mounted display, and if I can move to the next slide. Okay, beam into a virtual hospital, which now we call it Metaverse, right? So this was the idea driving the project, and we actually demonstrated that, again, there could be an interaction with patients at home, and it could be also a physical interaction through robotics. So we had a robotic arm that transmitted forces, and the patients could get trained into different exercises. There could be a physical exploration, and this was 14 years ago. So it's really, we are at the very early stages now, but these ideas come from some years ago, and this could be done already. So these are possibilities that are the basis for the metaverse that is now coming. There are many applications in mental health. For example, the treatment of phobias, this was treatment also 20 years ago. It started treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder with veterans for war in the United States. Fear of heights, this is work from our group, treating phobia of heights. There has been a lot of work on paranoia. I won't go into the details, but this is already going into psychiatry applications. And we have been working, also starting in another European project, VERE, in 2013 or 12, I think. We started thinking whether this perspective taken could be used, for example, in order to rehabilitate aggressors. So what happens if an aggressor takes the perspective of the victim, sees a situation from a different perspective? Is this going to increase empathy? Is this going to change behavior? Is this going to be useful to decrease violent behavior? And we have done this, we've done many studies, and we have now been working for a number of years with the Justice Department in Catalonia, and now at national level in Madrid. And now these systems that we developed, first testing the scientific basis, including brain imaging and so on, now is being used in prisons in Spain. Is being used in Catalonia in 5 prisons. Now the psychotherapists are using these contents on their own with our supervision, but is more than 1,000 users have gone through this, and there is a very good feedback at different levels from the therapists and from the users as well. So this has been used also in collaboration with our group. There was a study in New Jersey in the United States with the police there in order to use this capability to decrease racial bias, to decrease also racial bias in the police. And there was a very interesting study demonstrating that it was useful to change behavior by using this kind of training. So, and we are using it to, in general, for example, in corporations, to improve human relationships. So there are many possible applications apart from the entertainment and professional and so on. So now, what is the metaverse? So the metaverse is, first, is a shared virtual space. So usually people think, you know, virtual reality, one puts a head-mounted display, people get very isolated. But this is not the case, because actually you can be with other people in virtual reality. So it's a shared virtual space. It's built by the convergence of physical reality and virtual reality. What this means is that it doesn't need to be fully immersive. Virtual reality, it can be augmented reality. It can be the integration of different types of virtual reality, which is called generally as XR, extended reality. So there can be different ways, and the idea is that it's persistent. So there is going to be persistent spaces where we can work and where we can have part of our lives. So it presents different challenges. Many of them are technical, because it requires a lot of interoperability, and there are then all kinds of consequences: economic, educational, legal, as we will hear about, ethical, and there can be negative implications, but also very positive implications. So, for example, in our group, we use this VR United that has been developed in the group, where we are at home, we have our own avatars, personalized avatars, and we get together in a virtual space. I had a video, but I removed it because it was heavier presentation, but But basically, we can have meetings. It's very different experience from a Zoom meeting, from a video conference, because you are, like we are now, in a shared space with people. People move, you see how they move, you see how they interact in a 3D space, and you share a space at the same time. So it's a very different experience. And we used, and one can have personalized avatars, which is also going to raise all kind of issues that will be discussed here. But basically, what a few years ago take quite a bit of time, now it can be generated in half an hour or 15 minutes, even with a photograph. Of course, one can do a very sophisticated 3D scanning of the whole body, but one can do just a photograph and then get a personalized avatar, which are pretty good, as you can see here. Then applications, entertainment, professional. I put here, I selected the image of an old person because there is this misunderstanding. People think old people cannot deal with this. But in my experience, really old people are very receptive. They really like it. They really enjoy it. And of course, it's very good for solitude, for people that cannot move easily, so they can be in spaces with other friends, with other people, play, do different activities. So really old people, it has a very great acceptance for them. So it's a very important issue now, for example, in Europe, the problem of aging, of population, and also in general, people that have difficulties for movement. So I will just mention now the kind of data that we can obtain. So we can acquire data through this. We can acquire the body tracking. We can acquire the speech, what people talk often or respond to situations, even if we don't ask them to. People talk in virtual reality, they answer and so on. The behavior, the eye tracking, the new headsets come with eye tracking, so you can see where people are looking at. Facial expressions, also there are new systems that can capture the expressions of the face. Eventually, one can integrate other measures, for example, for experimental reasons, like facial temperature, how you respond to a stimulus, physiological variables like electrocardiogram, skin conductance response. And then there can be all other kind of signals that can be used also to drive the VR, like brain-computer interfaces. We can use closed-loop control of environments that can be adaptive to our interactions or our situation. And of course, the AI control of avatars, which now is quite extensive at the moment. So I think with this, I will finish. I will just show you one example. This is a paper this year in Nature, and with this, I will finish. Mm-hmm. So this lady here had a stroke, and she cannot speak, and she cannot move. So this person got implanted some electrodes, invasive, in her motor cortex. And because the new machine learning techniques of data analysis can control the speech of the avatar that you can see in the screen in real time. This is something that was totally unthinkable a few years ago, because it's very difficult to reconstruct the speech from cortical signals. So this is really completely new. She can think of sentences and they can be spoken. So you can imagine that a person in this situation that cannot move and cannot speak can have, in the metaverse, a professional life, can have a life of social interaction, a life of other activities. So basically can have a life with an avatar that moves well, that speaks well, and that can have an active life. So I think this is very important to take into account, that all these applications are possible. And we just got a European project that is Meta 2, which is to prevent the gender-based inappropriate social interactions in the metaverse, which seems to be a new problem already. So with this, I finish, and thanks.
Thank you very much, Mavi. I have a yeah. It really raised plenty of questions, but we will wait for the discussion to ask them. Ricard, please go ahead with our GDPR.
Good morning to everybody. Let me say that most of the metaverse or virtual worlds application will be provided by private companies. And now I need to start like these companies with a disclaimer. Or in legal terms, excusatio non petita, accusatio manifesta. I'm coming from now my last years, I have been working on health. Then for me, it's really familiar what I could see here. And let me say that healthcare research, healthcare services, health in general, is the positive way to see that. If we are looking at any hype regarding analytics, AI, new models for medicine, metaverse, let me say that this is the most wonderful and amazing site to talk and to deal with that. But this is not the only site to consider in this area. Because I think we have to start to talk about that, or to begin to talk about that regarding or remembering lessons learned. Because we have a really interesting lessons learned in the last 20 years, in the last 15 years. We are living in the digital transformation revolution that is based on data. Data that has been collected in the last 15 years with a non-rules environment. This is our experience. Let me say that the first rule in order to be competitive as company in the early years of this century was to be really quick in developing, implementing, releasing, and monetizing applications. This was the market main rule in the developing on internet in the commercial perspective. It means that a lot of companies were working on that, and nobody asked about how to protect your privacy, how to protect your communications, because we assume that the company could read my email with consent and profiling me and profile me without any risk regarding not data protection, but my communications protection, my secrecy of communications. Because okay, you have not to be worried because this is a machine. There are no men. But this is not the question. And is this machine reading my emails if I'm not one of the customers of this company? What about my rights there? And this is my main approach to that. When we are talking about data protection, we learned that this is not an isolated right. It's an instrumental right that is really a basilar right for granting our human rights as a whole. Because we are talking about information. Let me say that I prefer the approach of Alan West in the United States in the 70s, who talk about informational privacy. And he was considering bytes. What's information I'm providing to you? And this information relates only to my privacy or to my ideology, to my feelings, to my pain, to my consciousness, to my behavior. And we are talking about that in this kind of virtual worlds. Let me say, we are riding now the hype. It's like the generative AI. Okay, now when we are thinking on virtual worlds, we are thinking on living on internet in the same way like in real worlds. I think that for now, this is not the case. We see different applications, and most of them are really professional training and specific applications. We are not talking, at minimum, to live in a non-real, in a virtual world as persons, just in this moment, as a general proposal, but it should be done. And in this case, what is the approach of the European Union to this kind of technology developing? The idea is so clear, and we are not talking only about GDPR, we are talking about a complete digital code of laws in Europe. And we are talking about human-centric approach, human rights respect, and risk governance. These are more or less the three pillars we have to consider in order to develop a virtual world like that. And in practice, this must be based in the privacy engineering procedures designed by GDPR. Let me say that I'm working in a robotics institute. We are developing virtual experiences, but my main work regards how to implement European image data repositories to process data in order to research on health and things like that. And in my experience, the way to read GDPR, it's really relevant, and this will be the case for virtual worlds. There is a first essential approach to that. Let me be non-legalist on that. The first issue that one body needs to ask himself or herself is this legal? I'm infringing any human right? What I'm doing will be more or less proportional in terms of impacting in human rights? Could I do that? This is the approach that is used by the European Court, by the European Human Rights Court, and by the European data protection bodies in Europe. And there is a really interesting document of the European Data Protection Supervisor on how to measure proportionality in processing data. Okay, we are pretty sure that what we are doing is not infringing any law. Please, let me underline that. Any law. Sometimes where people is talking about data protection, thinks only on GDPR. But this is not the case. If you read GDPR, Article 6 and 9, they are open to the whole legal framework. Then the main idea is any law. And if I'm not infringing any law, the question is not yes or no, but how do we develop that? And let me say that I enjoy a lot with your presentation, because for me it has been some kind of first phase of designing. I'm taking, this is the reason I'm taking notes, requirements for developing these tools. Because first decision I must take on that is, okay, is here needed a data protection impact assessment? Obviously, yes. There are so many conditions. And then this is an approach of risk that means that I have to verify a lot of risks, identify how to deal with that, and provide solutions. If I could pass this stage, in next step, I must to design. And they have to use privacy by design tools. It means that it's so relevant to design correctly during all of the process. This is not the final result. This is an ongoing activity during the codification, during the beta testing, and finally during release, and in the whole life of the product. I have to be fulfilling GDPR all of the time. Let me say that you know that in a lot of social networks, do you remember any social network when you are giving permission to process your images for third people, third parties, third persons? Are there everybody sharing your images in different social networks or not? But let me say, the legal theory and the legal practice of how to protect your image comes from 1903, from a Supreme Court case in United States called Folder Rochester, Miss Robertson in front of a company called Rochester. We know how to protect our image the last 100 years. And we are not doing nothing about that. This is really relevant. On the other hand, this privacy engineering must be combined with other laws. Why? For example, it's obvious from your presentation that we will be using probably in these virtual worlds AI tools. not only in order to provide the experience and the usual functioning of the tool, but to process the data we are obtaining. Then we have to consider AI Act, and there are forbidden activities in Article 5. And there is a clear risk model for developing AI in high-risk systems, high-risk systems. But in my opinion, and we are talking about that, this model is really useful not only for high risk, but for every system you are developing. Let me say that the Digital Services Act is empowering persons. If you see articles like, I remember 4, 5, and 6, I have a control over my data in case of companies providing services to me. Then we have to consider not only, okay, this is not only about the experience, this is about the control of data. I'm talking about raw data, not the data that has been transformed and have IP rights and things like that. On the other hand, the European Union is really interested in sharing experiences like yours and sharing data in the European data spaces. And they are promoting, let me say, it's really interesting to know the polite language of the European Union. Here it's bad to talk about data brokering. We prefer to take about intermediation services or about sharing data or data holder instead of data owner. This is our model. But how do we share this data? For common good, not for the only profit of one company, for common good, for small and medium enterprises, for universities, for researchers. This will be one of the main concerns on Data Governance Act. And let me say that I have been working in Spain in the Digital Rights Charter. And we were really concerned with one concept, pseudonymity. How could I live my virtual experience like my real experience? I don't need to say I'm Ricard Martínez when I'm buying a newspaper. What do we do in this case? How to protect my identity, but at the same time, how to provide law enforcement bodies information about one person who is making serious crimes on a virtual world. At the end of the day, and I think I'm at the finish of my presentation, we have to be concerned about population and knowledge and feelings, because what are they feeling with that? They feel concerned? They have any worry about their privacy rights or their rights? Or they are only enjoying the experience? What American lawyers said about that is that, okay, probably we can define what privacy is, but let me be clear, a judge recognize it immediately. And this is the question. We have no population with consciousness about privacy, about how to conduct themselves in this environment, but the conflicts will arrive, and then we will have to learn on that. And my final thought is about consent. I must underline that. I'm talking about consent at the end of my presentation, not at the beginning. Why? Because it's really relevant to talk with you about what is called the consent fallacy. Probably consent will be the worst lawful basis for processing data all over the world. Why? Because in this kind of services, there is an asymmetry between the two parts or the two parties of the contract. And I'm introducing a new concept, contract. Because I'm enjoying services for free, but they are not for free. I'm paying with my privacy. And what the legal basis will be? Consent or contract? Let me say, if I'm talking in consent, I could exercise my rights on data protection, but if I'm talking about contract, I have the consumer rights in addition. And I'm not renouncing to my data protection rights. I think we need to explore that because due to the application of Digital Services Act, we are having experiences on that. There are so many companies, and in cookies, it's the same. There are so many cookies that are saying, okay, if you are not giving me consent, you have to pay. But let me say, this is not consent, this is contract. Because you have no possibilities to choose, then this is a contract. Then we have to change our mind. We have to reconsider how we are applying data protection to this kind of environment. And we have to be really concerned about future reuse of data, about control, who is controlling the controller. Yeah, let me say, we are talking about have a real life experience. We are talking about living, one of your examples, regard people living really hard experiences as patients in a virtual world. This is life. This is not only people making likes, it's your life. Then so many controls must be implemented to that. And there is an open question for future that regards neuro rights. And this is really relevant. And this is all from my side.
Thank you very much.
And I need the clicker.
And now we have Martin Evers with avatars. Please go ahead.
Yes. Okay, so in these 15 minutes, I would like to widen a little bit the scope of our debate, not only talking about data protection, which is, of course, very important cornerstone for the digital economy, but I will talk about digital identities and avatars in virtual worlds. So avatars form the cornerstone of virtual worlds because they are actually the representations of us when we enter the virtual world. And without the avatar, we cannot act, we cannot communicate, we cannot move in the virtual world. So they are really essential. And when we look a little bit at kind of like the predecessors of metaverses or virtual worlds, and we look at the gaming industry, there we can see that players really devote a lot of time and also a lot of money into developing their avatars. We all want to look nice, even if it's just in the virtual world. So then the question, of course, arises, like, how does the law, and more specifically European law, protect our digital identities? So how do we protect our digital selves in virtual worlds? Well, clearly a lot of things can happen to your avatar, no? So it might be that other users also using their avatars kill you. It might be, if that is possible in the virtual world, of course, it might be that they insult you, that they harass you. Yeah, there have been even incidents where avatars were raped. It might be also that the platform provider does something to your avatar, restrict your movements, restrict your way you communicate with others. Delete maybe after hundreds and thousands of hours you have spent in the virtual world, your digital self. So what can you do then? What kind of tools, remedies does the legal system give you? In order to deal with this question, let's first have a brief look on what kind of avatars exist in virtual worlds, what kind of wrongs can happen vis-a-vis the avatar, what kind of contractual rights on avatars there are, maybe intellectual property rights on avatar. And last but not least, maybe there's even such thing eventually as a digital identity as a fundamental right. Before I start, I would like to point out also something. It is really not about giving rights to the avatar itself. So it's not like about like conferring some kind of legal personhood to the avatar itself. We have had this discussion, I think, quite a lot with artificial intelligence systems, whether they should be recognized as persons under the law. I think the majority nowadays holds that that is not such a good idea. We can also discuss it later. But my focus here specifically is really like, what do I have as a natural person? What kind of rights do I have on my avatar? So it's not about the rights of the avatar, but it's about the rights on the avatar. Yeah, so I mean, when we look at real world identity, of course, that can mean a lot of things, right? And what I would like to point out is that identity is more than just identification. Of course, we all think about means how to identify yourself, but it's also like about self-identification. So how do I perceive myself? And also a very important element of identity, a self-representation, reputation, no? How do I want others to see me? Well, if we look at digital identities, you can say, well, it has also these manifold elements, right? So a digital identity is a representation of a natural or legal person, which allows the identity holder to prove who they are during online or offline interactions or transactions, but also it's a set of claims made by one party about itself and another data subject. And then there might be in the digital world all kinds of different forms of identity. So you could be the same. Yeah? So I start like from the top. You can be like the same person in the virtual world, look more or less the same as you do in real life, or different. You can be an authentic character that actually exists, or a fictitious character that just appears in fiction. It can be that you have only one avatar, or that you have multiple avatars. You can have an avatar that is only temporarily used or permanently used. It can be that you act with a certain avatar in the public, or maybe only in the private. It might be that you own your avatar, or that you just possess your avatar. And there might be a lot of other facets. I will get back to that, right? So you can like see there are like many ways how you just like get a digital representation of yourself, but it might be also maybe an animal. It might be just an abstract thing. There's like all kinds of different avatars that we can find in virtual worlds. Some that you can change, some that you cannot change, some that represent yourself, some that are not human, or that are human, or that are maybe only abstract avatars. And also the interactions in virtual worlds can be quite different. There's a huge market. The avatar market is expected to exceed 500 billion euros by 2030. So it really matters actually then what happens, or what might happen to your avatar, and what happens. And that these things are not fiction, but that these things really happen. You can see really in the gaming world. One really prominent example is the example of Ugandan Knuckles, where these little birds were used to harass another user. Or at Fortnite, for example, there was in this virtual world a discussion about race and racism. And there, Fortnite players then started throwing virtual tomatoes, yeah, at the game there. And then also the question was, what can you do? Well, if we talk about what can happen to the avatar, let's also bear in mind that not all types of harm occurring in the metaverse can and should be sanctioned. Obviously, like if you enter a virtual world where the aim of the virtual world is to kill each other, then I think we should not then sanction this kind of like behavior with any legal actions, right? And there's also different social settings, right? So it might be a multiplayer gaming environment. It might be a collaborative space. It might be a business space, or you might enter the virtual world for a business meeting or personal meeting, or for example, for medical purposes, as we have learned in the morning. And also, like what you can do in the virtual world is to a large extent not so much actually determined by written rules, but more by encoded rules. How the platform is actually designed, whether it allows your avatar to fly or not, is actually predetermined then by the platform itself. And then I think, and that's I think the very interesting question legally, is there can be two kinds of like different forms of avatars. One is some avatar where you are still identifiable as a person. Well, if something happens to you and your avatar gets insulted and you can trace it back directly to your person, then I think we don't have so many problems legally to say that this was a defamation. Now, but what happens if I have chosen maybe to appear in the virtual world as someone totally looking differently, right? And I'm not identifiable to the other user. Only maybe the platform provider might have its means to know who I am. Yeah? But other users, they just see me as I'm represented by my avatar. So is this then a defamation? Is this then something that should be actionable in the metaverse or in other virtual worlds? Well, let's start first with contractual rights on avatars, because like, of course, like when we enter a platform, then we conclude a contract, no? And there are written rules, of course, that these platforms have. They have codes of conduct. For example, these codes of conduct might then prohibit any sexist, racist, discriminatory, or harassing language, behavior, or content. And then we have also, as I mentioned before, these inbuilt rules. Yeah, so what is really possible on the platform? And when this happened with the tomatoes at Fortnite, also Fortnite then just restricted the possibility to throw virtual tomatoes. So that is also like a possibility. Yeah. So then the question is, of course, what can I do as a user vis-a-vis my platform provider if the platform provider restricts my actions? Well, I mean, we have the Digital Services Act that entered into force in Europe. And by and large, the platform rules determine, of course, what can be done or not. And Article 14, paragraph 1 of the Digital Services Act requires platform providers actually to set out in a transparent way what platform users are allowed to do or not. But then there's also like an additional control mechanism that is foreseen in the 4th paragraph of the Article 14. And according to this provision, providers, in applying and enforcing the restrictions, have to do that with due regard to the rights and legitimate interests of all parties involved, including the fundamental rights of the recipients of the service. So it refers to the Charter of Fundamental Rights. I will get back to that. And then, of course, if you think maybe like these contract terms in your contract are unfair, then at least when you have a business to consumer relationship, we have a review of contract terms where we can review the transparency and also the fairness of terms. However, contracts are always between the contractual parties, and I don't have any contract with the other users. No? So like what happens actually if other users do something to my avatar? Do I have any legal remedy then? No. Basically, there is the principle of privity of contract. There's some court decisions, especially like in Germany, where German courts tried actually like to find ways how also to create some kind of third-party effect. We could also like understand virtual worlds maybe as group of contracts, linked contracts, or network contracts. But by and large, we can see that, of course, contractual rights only protect to a limited extent the user's rights of his avatar. Now, how about property rights? Well, avatars do not exist in the physical world, right? And most civil law property regimes actually, they refer in their property laws to physical objects. So therefore, there's no ownership possible on digital assets, including non-fungible tokens. Common law, property law might see that a little bit differently. There's an interesting decision of the High Court in UK, where the court ruled that under certain conditions, NFTs could be regarded as legal property. Now, how about copyrights? There, the problem is when you create your avatar, that can be also done in an automatic way. And we are all aware, of course, of all the discussions generative AI causes with regard to copyright law. So I will just skip this also for the sake of the discussion. Now, my last point. My last point is maybe we can say that not only physical identity, but also digital identity could be recognized as a fundamental right. Now, if we look into case law of the European Court of Human Rights interpreting the convention, the court did recognize actually identity, the right to identity under Article 8. Yeah? The right to personal autonomy and identity, the right to freely choose the way to live according to own ideas, to establish and develop relationships with others. In particular, this right is also like a right to name and identity documents, but also to ethnic identity, to privacy, data protection, to publicity, to reputation, and even to gender reassignment. Yeah? Also a right to desired appearance. I wouldn't go so far, but you see this right to identity is recognized. So why not then also recognize a digital identity? Because multiple real-world identities are already recognized. We act differently in different social contexts and are protected. Why not then also in digital worlds? Isn't maybe the digital identity just an extension of ourselves? And the avatar is a projection of our personality. And isn't it also true that there is not this clear distinction anymore between online and offline, between virtual worlds and real worlds? These lines are totally blurred. I'm now also out here speaking to our virtual audience, which is of course also a real audience. So therefore, I think there is a point to make here. There is a case, I think, but then the question is, what kind of identity gets protected? So like, again, and maybe it makes a difference whether you appear in the virtual world as an animal or as a human being, whether it is permanent identity in the sense that always when you are in virtual worlds, you act with this avatar, or only like for 10 minutes, and so on. So therefore, I think there's lots of open questions. If you say that there is a fundamental right to digital identity, then it needs to be protected. So therefore, that has then ramifications to contract law, to tort law, and to many other fields of the law. So my conclusions are, yes, avatars are digital representations of humans. They can be also subject to various types of wrongs. They can be protected by contractual rights, maybe to some extent also to intellectual property rights, and possibly to a new fundamental right to digital identity. But this legal protection then depends on the type of avatar, the platform rules, and last but not least, let's not forget, it also depends, of course, on the jurisdiction and on the applicable law. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Martin. As I was mentioning in the beginning, and now I will open the floor for questions. But first of all, I have two questions, and I moderate it, so you cannot do anything about it. And I have a general question, but I'm sorry, but I have a small question specifically for Mavi, because after your presentation, I would say I'm a little bit scared in the sense that I don't see the limits. There are new devices that are being commercialized, like for instance, Neuralink, this company of Elon Musk, just talk about a chip that is implanted in the brain of a person. So what are the limits of immersive technologies? You have talked about haptic technologies, BCIs. Do you see a limit, or this is a development that is impossible to stop?
Well, the interaction through thinking is being there in the minds of everyone in the science fiction, and now in reality to some extent is still with a lot of limitations. And of course, it's a very important topic to take into account. Is there is an important need from the medical perspective. So I just gave a case of a stroke here with this lady that I showed at the end. There is 1 million strokes in Europe, for example, per year. There are many different situations that require this. Elon Musk has brought it up to the news, no? But this is, and actually Neuralink, what they did was to recruit scientists that were doing that in many labs, with the difference that they have more money and more everything goes at a faster speed. But of course, this is a procedure that is invasive. This is not something expected for the general population. Okay. So it's for a medical use. At this moment, of course, there is the issue of the neural rights that you mentioned, but the technology is not there yet, in the sense that the non-invasive brain-computer interfaces, they have quite low spatial resolution. The data extracted from one brain cannot be used for another brain. So really, we are not there at the point where people are going to be reading our minds. But as a means of interaction, is something important to consider. And yeah, and I think there can be interaction with many different signals from our body. I mentioned at the end all the data that can be acquired. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's difficult to say. You say, where are the limits? As a scientist, we never say this is impossible, because it always is wrong at the end, no? So I don't see what the limit can be. At the moment, probably it's going to be a legal limit.
I see. So talking about the legal framework, Martin, the first reflection that I get from your presentation is that with digital identity, with avatars, basically we can be whoever we want to be in the metaverse, which is, on one side, is a good thing, actually. However, in my opinion, it raised two concerns, and I would like to know your opinion in general. The first is about the possibility to act anonymously or pseudonymously, as Ricard has said before, which entails problems in terms of law enforcement. how to identify that person, because you have mentioned the different position. I mean, to identify a person that has been defamated in the metaverse. But what about the problem that we may have to identify the person that is behind an avatar? This is one concern that actually this is a concern that already exists in the internet. This is not new. This is not new. And I am surprised that when you try with one of these virtual worlds, you can be whoever you want to be. They don't ask for any kind of personal information. So there is, I think there is a balance there. And there is a second concern that is an ethical concern. I mean, can we really be whoever we want to be in the internet? Oh, not in the internet, sorry, in the metaverse? I mean, can we all be white and westernized in the metaverse and get rid of our ethnics and racial traits? What do you think about that? I don't know if it's too much of a question to talk in.
No, I mean, like
5 minutes. But...
Yeah. Well, there are many different virtual worlds, I would say. And I would then distinguish, like, for what purpose you create a certain virtual world and you enter a virtual world. And then even like within one virtual world, there might be so many different ways what you can do. And of course, it makes a difference whether you run a business in the virtual world. And there you want customers who are real customers. And you want to make sure that these customers also pay, although they maybe get only virtual goods, but then still you want to make you want to run your business. So therefore, transactional identity there is crucial. But I was referring more like general, I think, in my talk to situations where we use virtual worlds as spaces to communicate. And also like in the physical world, when we go, let's say, out, we go into a club, we meet someone, we don't know exactly what kind of identity this person has. So therefore, there is already, I think, the possibility to remain to a certain extent anonymous in the physical world. Of course, the virtual world gives us more possibilities to hide our identity. So therefore, I would say it's, I think, under privacy aspects, quite crucial, and regarding the fundamental rights aspect of freedom of expression, to have also the possibility in virtual worlds to remain anonymous to a certain extent, because we have these spillover effects if we are identifiable in each and every situation where we act, that then we self-censor ourselves. And we have this discussion already, of course, with facial recognition systems at public spaces and all the fears surrounding these technologies are an expression actually of this fear that we will lose our anonymity in public spaces.
Ricard?
Same?
Yeah, the same question.
Okay.
But from another perspective, and we finish, right?
Let me say that I completely agree with your final conclusion on Article 8 of the European Human Rights Convention, especially because we need to have to solve problems immediately. We can expect, I don't know, 5-6 years in order to have a new regulation for a new gadget. We have to apply constitutional categories in order to solve problems. And then I think you are completely right. And in fact, while I was working in Article 8, I have the same conclusion. Then a digital identity could be covered by this article, and this will be a real tool. But on the other hand, what you are talking about, it's really difficult to be solved. First, due to the different variety of virtual worlds. Then it means that I probably have no only one digital identity, but different digital identities in different worlds that probably will be different parts of my real identity. Because it's not the same if I'm working, I'm playing tennis or something like that. And but secondly, let me say that the problem of pseudonymity is really relevant for me in terms of those who are infringing laws. But I'm worried about an additional issue because we are not talking about targeting people. And in this real world, I could be targeted. I could be profiled. It means that under certain circumstances in this real world, I'm not talking with one people in a pub. I'm talking with the people are in the pub that the algorithm has decided instead of me. And probably there will be a real world when I will be targeted. I will have a profile and my digital identity will be governed by a third party who is the company. I'm worried about that too.